Greetings to you today on this Monday, the 6th, the 6th of May. And our devotion today is entitled The Way of Peace. Its author is John Howard Yoder. He is an American Mennonite, and he is also known as a New Testament scholar. The Way of Peace. It begins with some verses from Isaiah 53. He was despised, speaking of Jesus, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, though he had done no violence. In all ages, these words of the prophet concerning the one called the servant of the Lord have been beloved by Christians for the portrait they paint of our crucified master. Yet when we find these words echoing in the New Testament, it is not only because they are fitting or beautiful words to describe Christ and his sacrifice on behalf of sinful humanity. It is because they constitute a call to the Christian to do likewise. There we read in 1 Peter 2, if you have done right and suffer for it, your endurance is worthwhile in the sight of God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered on your behalf and left you an example. It is for you to follow in his steps. The innocent, slightly uncomplaining suffering of Christ is not only an act of Christ on our behalf from which we benefit, it is also an example of Christ for our instruction, which we are to follow. This portrait of Christ is to be painted again on the ordinary canvas of our lives. Did not Jesus himself say that those who would follow him must deny themselves and take up their cross? What does it mean to bear a cross? The cross of Christ was the price of his obedience to God in the middle of a rebellious world. It was suffering for having done right, for loving where others hated, for representing in the flesh the forgiveness and the righteousness of God among people both less forgiving and less righteous. The cross of Christ was God's method of overcoming evil with good. The cross of the Christian is no different. It is the price of one's obedience to God's love. Such unflinching love for friend and foe alike will mean hostility and suffering for us, as it did for him. Jesus instructed his disciples simply and clearly not to resist evil and to love one's enemy in Matthew 5:39-45. He was not a foolish dreamer spinning out futile hopes for a better world, thinking that if only we keep smiling, everything will turn out all right with our opponents turned into friends and our sacrifices all repaid. He knew full well the cost of such unlimited love. It is by this that we know what love is, says the apostle, that Christ laid down his life for us, and we in turn are bound to lay down our lives for our brothers. 1 John 3:16. Christians whose loyalty to the Prince of Peace puts them out of step with today's nationalistic world because they are willing to love their nation's friends but not to hate their nation's enemies, are not unrealistic dreamers who think that by their objections they will end all wars. On the contrary, it is the soldiers who think they can put an end to wars by preparing for just one more. Christians love their enemies because God does too, and commands his followers to do the same. That is the only reason, and that is enough for us, should be. No one created in God's image and for whom Christ died can be for me an enemy, whose life I am willing to threaten or to take unless I am more devoted to something else, to a political theory, to a nation, to the defense of certain privileges, or to my own personal welfare, than I am to God's cause. His loving invasion of this world and his prophets in the Son and in the church, his church. If any kind of conflict, from the first fight to the labor dispute, from the family quarrel to the threat of international communism, the Christian sees the world and its wars from the viewpoint of the cross. When we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son, Romans 5:10. The Christian has no choice. If this was God's pattern, if his strategy for dealing with his enemies was to love them and give himself for them, it must be ours as well. That is obviously truths. Those are thoughts that come to us from a group that are pacifists. And I have, for the last several years, given that a lot of thought. I grew up being a John Wayne lover and a war movie lover, and I still like war movies, except now I see in them the hell that war brings. It doesn't bring a kingdom peace. It brings we have peace because we beat you guys. We crushed you. We defeated you. We were better than you. That's what war does. And I know afterwards in history, alliances are formed and those kinds of things, but they don't hold up either, because it's not kingdom peace. It's not what God offers to us. And so to kill in order to bring peace is an oxymoron, is it not? We send people to hell when we kill them. You may not be a pacifist. I'm probably not 100% pacifist, but I will not kill somebody to defend myself. Simple as that. I know where I'm headed. I don't know where they're headed. I guess I might sign up to be a conscientious objector. I don't know. Don't hate me. Hey, love your enemies. If you're my brother or sister in Christ, you got to love me. That's the rule. Blessings to you today on this Monday.